Hello and welcome to Yesterday's Airlines. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at what is possibly the most exciting 400 scale model release of 2025, or at least it is to me, and that is of course the Pacific Southwest Airlines Lockheed Tristar N-1011-4. And this aircraft is one of a pair that served with PSA in the early 1970s for only a really short period. The Tristars were an unmitigated disaster for Pacific Southwest, but regardless of that, they looked truly astounding in this wonderful fuchsia and orange livery. And they also had a couple of other really exciting and unusual features for Tristars, and we'll be taking a look at those in this video. Now, I've been working quite a bit on Pacific Southwest history stuff at the website, so if you haven't seen it already, I've posted 3 blog posts talking about the history of Pacific Southwest in that period, running from 1949 up to the 1970s, when they made the fateful decision to acquire these Lockheed Tristars. So check out the website Yesterday's Airlines to see those Av history blogs. They segue beautifully into this one, and I will be doing a 4th piece covering the Tristars themselves. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel here at YouTube. Thank you very much to everyone who has been subscribing recently. Got some really good viewing figures, and I really appreciate that. Lastly, before we get into checking out the Tristar, don't forget to check out my sponsor for this video, Northeast Diecast, a fabulous seller of second-hand 200 and 400 scale models with an amazing range of some very hard to find models, which you can get 15% off if you use the code Yesterday's Airlines 15. So use the code Yesterday's Airlines 15 for 15% off your order at Northeast Diecast. But let's get on and check out this amazing model. Now, before I get into this new NG Models version, it would be remiss of me not to mention that I already own a PSA Tristar, because I've got N-1011-2, the Gemini Jets release, which dates from 1999. And this is a great opportunity to illustrate how far 400 scale models have come, because I've really liked this Gemini Tristar, but it is 26 years old now, and you can see that in the mold and the detail finishing. You see the undercarriage is quite simple. These early Gemini Jets had an extra seam at the tail, and you can see that it doesn't have necessarily all the sort of detailing that you're going to be seeing on this NG Models release. But overall, it is still a nice model. It doesn't have that detailing in the engines, doesn't have the detailing in the wings. You wouldn't expect that from a 25-year-old model. This has still been a great model for my collection for many years, and I will be replacing it with a new NG Models version, but it just shows really how far 400 scale has come in that time. So let's get on and see how far it's come with this NG Tristar. So it's got a very nice box, as NG Models releases generally do. Lovely use of the PSA colours for the time, otherwise fairly standard. It's been a long time since NG Tristars came in foam packaging. They nowadays just have the plastic cradle like all the other models do, but does come with the CRP card, as you would expect. Off comes the cradle, and here is the aircraft herself. So out of the cradle, and the natural metal belly on this Tristar really gleams, as does all the paintwork. There's some really delightful paintwork, print and detailing going on this model, and of course you can see very clearly that it's got a lot more detail than that much older Gemini release, as you would expect with a model from 2025. Overall, everything's attached, looking really good here, and it's showing off the grinning bird smile. These Tristars were called the mother grinning bird when they were put into service. Looks fabulous, the PSA smile on the front, but also it illustrates very clearly the very special part of these Tristars under the belly there. Because these Tristars were unique amongst all Tristars. PSA didn't need a large amount of baggage storage for its short high density routes in California, and instead it decided to devote a section of the underfloor area that was previously the baggage hold to become a lounge that was accessible via its own stairs. And you can see on this plan here that there's space in that lounge for 16 paying passengers. But it did necessitate that structural addition under the aircraft to provide extra strengthening, and that's why you've got that fairing under the forward fuselage. You can see here, looking at some images of inside the lounge, how incredibly 1970s the whole look is, with this orange carpet, bright green and orange chairs. It looks really funky, and it's incredibly unusual and not something that anybody else put on their Tristars. In these images here, you can see both the lounge and also inside the cabin of the L-1011. And again, it's very 1970s all over. But the 70s were bright, the 70s were loud, and that was shown everywhere on these PSA aircraft and on the cabin crew themselves, who wore these quite incredible bright pink outfits with miniskirts and hats. So it was a very colourful time. It was a very colourful airline. And these PSA Tristars were unique in having this underfloor lounge, which necessitated this extra fairing here to protect the body of the aircraft in case of an accident. Really looks fabulous on this model, where it is for the first time ever in 400 scale actually put on the model as an extra and not just printed on. So it looks really, really good, I think. Really pleased with the way that that has been added to the model there. I think it looks spectacular, and that is without shadow of doubt the most obvious element of a PSA Tristar. Even though only 2 were flown with PSA, a couple of others that were going to be delivered also existed, and those aircraft went on to fly with Wheelbase Canada, Aero Peru and LTU of Germany, with the fairings at least for a short time. So they're really obvious and easy to spot, but look spectacular and works really nicely on this model here. Moving on to the rest of the aircraft, and you can see that you've got that great detailing, lovely aerials underneath, and some really nice detailing on the underbody. And as I said before, the natural metal really gleams beautifully. Also, when you look at the engines on these PSA Tristars, they are again quite unusual for the engines for a Tristar, in that although they are obviously RB211s, they are fitted with a different type of thrust reverser, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Obviously you can't see the number 2 engine when you look from the front of the aircraft, because it is actually buried in the rear fuselage, and again here you can see the unusual thrust reversers, which we'll talk about in a second, with those little prongs. Again, something that nobody else has modelled in 400 scale aside from NG. So they're showing some really great detailing here with these L-1011s. I just wish we saw more of them from NG, because they are one of my all-time favourite aircraft types, and this is one of the all-time best moulds in 400 scale without a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion. So let's talk a little bit about thrust reversal. Obviously, the concept of thrust reversers is that you use reverse thrust to slow down the aircraft upon landing. And you can see, as I've mentioned already on these Tristars, that there are specific thrust reversers on the rear of the engines. But it's not just a single thrust reverser on these early Tristars. They actually had 2 different types. Now, broadly, when you look at thrust reversers, there are 3 main types. You've got clamshell reversers, which are hot reversers. They take hot air from the engine, and they have clamshell doors which are moved into position. You've also then got bucket reversers, as was made famous on the Douglas DC-9, and they again move doors into position and reverse the thrust that way. And then you've got these cold cascade style reversers, which take the cold air part of the thrust and they push that backwards. And it is both the cascade type and the clamshell type of thrust reverser that were present on these early Tristars. So they both had the cold section and the hot section thrust reversers, which is highly unusual. The cold section cascade reversers form that big thick ring at the base of the exhaust there, and in this photograph you can see that with the thrust reversers deployed, that whole section of the cascade reverser moves backwards. But more interestingly here, and what is unusual, is you've also got these clamshell door hot section thrust reversers, which you can see here deployed with the clamshells moving out and then joining together to push the thrust into them and then around. And that is highly unusual. they were not very successful, the hot section thrust reversers, these clamshell type, on the Tristars. They caused a lot of maintenance issues, and they actually didn't do a great deal for the thrust reversal in the first place. So they were removed not many years into the Tristar's service, and only early Tristars were ever fitted with them. But they do give this really unusual look where you've got the two prongs that stick out the back of the exhaust that form the track for those clamshell doors to move along and give the engine that unique look. And as I said earlier, NG Models are the only people who've ever modelled this style of engineering exhaust on a 400 scale Tristar. So that's a really great detail, a really nice detail to have on this model. Okay, so that's a look at the model and some of the specific features of these PSA Tristars. Let's get this model up onto the turntable now so you can get a closer look. Okay, so now how does this lovely PSA Tristar fit into my collection? Well, really very well. As you can see, moving down the cabinet, which contains the local service airlines and then the territorial airlines and then into the interstate airlines. And we've got PSA down here next to Air Cal and Air Florida, all of them intrastate carriers from the pre-deregulated era. And the Tristar looks gorgeous sitting next to the 727s and 737-200s, also wearing that 1970s pink fuchsia scheme before they switched over to the orange. Really pleased to be able to add this model to the collection. It's been one that I've been wanting an updated version of for a long time, and I think NG have done a very good job on this model. Certainly, it is a significant upgrade on the old Gemini, which is still a really nice model. And here are both of those PSA Tristars showing the difference you get from 1999 to 2025. So that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed this look at Pacific Southwest's short-lived Tristars. And I will be doing an AV History blog post covering their short history of PSA in more detail very soon. Keep an eye out for that, and keep an eye out for other new content coming at the channel here. I'm posting nowadays pretty regularly. But that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching. It's goodbye from me.